Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today we celebrate the birthday of an artist who was both very eclectic, very different, but also someone who sold millions of records over the years. And this is, of course, Todd Rundgren. Now, Todd Rundgren was someone whose name was known by many, if not most, music listeners. He managed to get a number of songs that were sort of exceptions that proved his rule onto FM radio. But when you look at his entire catalog as a whole, he's really a kind of progressive solo artist who also was in a progressive band that he formed. And this was, of course, Utopia, where, for me anyway, some of his best work can be found. Now, Todd Rundgren is someone who, if you listen to some of his music, it's the most easy to digest and easy to get into. And some of his other music, I would say just over half, is the kind of thing that it takes a few uncomfortable listens before you really get it. And that's probably what kept some of his albums from becoming huge hits, because if you just took parts of his albums and sort of condensed them, you would have songs that were beautifully harmonic, beautifully melodic, wonderful sense of chordality. That, if anything, is my favorite thing about Todd Rundgren. His sense of chords is absolutely masterful. It's a level of sophistication that really belies a kind of modern composer. It's the kind of thing that we would even see in a lot of sophisticated forms of modal jazz. And then sometimes his music can be intentionally chaotic, intentionally grating, intentionally challenging. And you can't fault him for that because that is what he's trying to do. It's part of what he wants to do. And so then the question becomes, which album should I listen to first? Now, I've mentioned that question before, and this was in the context of Frank Zappa. And the reason that it comes up with Zappa is simply because of the ubiquity of music that he recorded. And so, if you're a sort of Zappa virgin, the question is, well, where do I go first? With Todd, yes, he did record a lot of music, not as much as Zappa, because hardly anyone did, but he did record a lot. And so I'm just going to randomly have a go and say that if you're totally inexperienced in the wild world of Todd Rundgren, I would try the 1977 album Whoops, Wrong Planet by his prog band Utopia. I think that that contains all of his most adventurous sonic and harmonic and chordal musicality, but it's presented in a package that's listenable, and there's not too much sort of dissonant experimentation that could put some people off. So if you're going to pick one album from the Toddography, if you will, to start with, I would say it would be Oops, Wrong Planet. And then I would sort of work my way backwards to the album Raw, R.A., that came out just before it, because the first track in particular, the overture and all of the other parts of it, is another great showcase of Todd's ability to manipulate chords and to compose with this great sense of harmony that just makes everything really build up to these climaxes. Really exciting stuff, really beautiful at times. And that's the other thing about Todd. He could make music incredibly beautiful when he wanted to, and he could make music incredibly jarring when he wanted to. He definitely was someone who enjoyed challenging his audience. So those are the places where I would personally begin. From there on, I would just go through all of his 70s albums, both with Utopia and as a solo artist, because that really was, in my view, his best decade, although he did great stuff in the 80s and 90s as well. The album A Wizard, a True Star is sort of, this is a solo album rather than Utopia. This is one of these albums that sort of every other song sort of alternates between one of these beautifully harmonic songs and one of these jarring, dissonant, challenging songs. But it is nevertheless considered an absolute classic, and not least because it came after the album Something Anything, which is Todd's sort of not attempt because it's a success, but it was Todd's exploration of the singer-songwriter realm and what he could do with that palette. And then he sort of turned that format on its head with A Wizard, a True Star, and went into dissonant and all sorts of interesting things like that. Then there's the album Todd, which is it's not an easy listen. The album after that, Initiation, has again, much like A Wizard, a True Star. It's one of those albums that can both make you feel relaxed, but also make you feel very tense. And then there's, of course, the Utopia debut, which again, as difficult compositions and it has more inviting compositions, but the inviting ones there, especially the opening track, really, really good. And then once we get to the end of the 70s, in 1978, Hermit of Mink Hollow is sort of his return somewhat to a something anything type of very ballad and song driven album. And it's from this album that we get the hit song and Can We Still Be Friends? And Robert Palmer did a wonderful cover version of that, which really does Todd's original composition justice. And then, of course, a few years later, he had a hit with the single Bang on the Drum All Day. You can hear it at many NFL stadiums when someone scores a touchdown. They'll still often play that song from the early 80s. Again, not necessarily characteristic of his experimentation, but he was a very musically diverse talent, is I should say, because he's still very much around. And incidentally, if you like one of the top selling albums of all time, Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell, well, the production was Todd, and Todd's sound palette was all over that album, as was a guitar solo or two. So Todd is a truly great musician, and hopefully that gives you some guidance of how to sort of slip into the Toddography without sort of stepping on some of the landmines that he occasionally lays out for you. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.